The boardroom fell silent. 23 executives, each worth more than most small countries, collectively held their breath. Their gazes darted toward the woman at the head of the table, her posture rigid, her knuckles white against the polished mahogany. Sloan Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Consolidated, was a force of nature that had reshaped the corporate landscape of the city. At 34, she had inherited a failing empire from her father and turned it into a billion-dollar conglomerate through sheer willpower, ruthless decision-making, and an unshakable belief that emotions were a liability in business. Her tailored charcoal suit was immaculate, her dark hair swept back in a severe bun that accentuated the sharp angles of her face, and her eyes, storm gray and unforgiving, were fixed on the empty chair at the far end of the table. The chair belonged to Damien Hart. For the third time in 2 weeks, he was absent from the Monday morning executive meeting. "Someone," Sloan said, her voice dangerously low, "please explain to me why my head of acquisitions cannot seem to find his way to this table on time. Or at all." The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one wanted to be the one to speak. Damien Hart was brilliant. The man had single-handedly orchestrated 3 of the most lucrative mergers in the company's history. He was also infuriatingly unpredictable, arriving late, leaving early, and somehow still outperforming everyone else on the team. "Theodore," Sloan snapped, turning to her aging CFO. "You're his direct superior. Explain." Theodore Winthrop cleared his throat, his jowls quivering slightly. "Well, Sloan, Damien has been dealing with some personal matters. I believe his wife." "His wife?" Sloan's laugh was sharp and brittle. "I don't care about his wife. I care about the fact that we have a $60 million acquisition on the line and my key strategist can't be bothered to show up for work. Do you have any idea what this looks like to the board?" "With respect," Theodore ventured, "perhaps you could be a bit more understanding." "Understanding?" Sloan rose from her chair, her voice climbing to a shrill pitch that made several executives flinch. "Understanding is what lost my father this company. Understanding is what turns corporations into charities. I run a business, Theodore, not a daycare. I don't have time to coddle grown adults who can't manage their personal lives. If Damien Hart can't fulfill his duties, I will find someone who can." She slammed her palm on the table, and the sound echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. "Now," she said, her voice returning to its usual ice-cold register, "someone call him. I want him in my office in the next 30 minutes, or he can start updating his resume." Damien Hart arrived 45 minutes later. Sloan watched him through the glass walls of her corner office, her fury mounting with each step he took across the executive floor. He moved with a deliberate calm that only made her angrier, his shoulders slightly hunched, his dark hair disheveled in a way that suggested he had run his fingers through it repeatedly. His suit was wrinkled, his tie slightly askew, and there were dark circles under his brown eyes that even a dim hallway light couldn't hide. He knocked on her door, and she didn't respond. She let him stand there for a full minute, letting the power dynamic settle firmly in her favor. Then, with a curt gesture, she summoned him inside. "Close the door," she said, her voice clipped. Damien complied, his movements slow, almost weary. He didn't meet her eyes. "You missed work again," Sloan began, her words precise and cutting as surgical scalpels. "For the 3rd time in 2 weeks. You were supposed to be at the executive meeting this morning. The Hawthorne acquisition team needed your input on the valuation models, and instead, they got an empty chair and a lot of questions about where their head of acquisitions had disappeared to." Damien opened his mouth to speak, but Sloan wasn't finished. "Let me be perfectly clear, Damien. I don't care about your personal problems. I don't care about your wife, or your children, or your dog, or whatever else is keeping you from doing the job you're paid exceptionally well to do. What I care about is results. And right now, your results are being compromised by whatever is going on in your private life. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to fix whatever is broken, you're going to show up on time, and you're going to stop making me look like I can't manage my own executive team." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle over him like a shroud. "Do I make myself clear?" Damien was silent for a long moment. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head bowed slightly, and Sloane watched his jaw tighten as if he was physically restraining himself from speaking. Then, slowly, he lifted his eyes to meet hers. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "You're right. My personal life shouldn't affect my professional performance. I apologize for the inconvenience." Sloane blinked. She had expected a defense, an excuse, a protest. She had prepared her counterarguments, her cutting retorts. What she hadn't expected was submission. "Good," she said, somewhat thrown off balance. "Then I trust this won't happen again." Damien nodded slowly. "It won't. I'll make sure of it." He turned toward the door, his shoulders still slumped, his gait heavy. Something in his posture made Sloane pause. She watched him walk away, and for the briefest moment, she noticed the tension in his spine, the way his fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the door handle. Before she could stop herself, she spoke. "Damien." He stopped, his hand frozen on the handle. "Yes?" "You look." Sloane faltered. She didn't do empathy. She didn't do concern. She did numbers and deadlines and quarterly reports. "You look exhausted. Are you ill?" He turned back to face her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was raw, wounded, and utterly devoid of his usual professional composure. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice cracked on the word. It's nothing. Really. I'll be back to normal in a few days." He left before she could ask any more questions, closing the door softly behind him. Sloane stood in her office, the silence pressing in around her, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years, uncertainty. She had built her entire career on reading people, on identifying weakness and exploiting it for the benefit of her company. She could see through lies, through false bravado, through the carefully constructed masks people wore in the boardroom. But Damien Hart's mask had slipped, and what she had glimpsed beneath it had shaken her. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. She didn't have time to worry about her employees' personal lives. That wasn't how you built a successful business. She had work to do, meetings to attend, deals to close. Damien Hart was just a distraction, a minor blip in the smooth operation of her corporate machine. She returned to her desk and buried herself in her reports, pushing the memory of his haunted eyes to the back of her mind. It happened again the following Monday. Sloane had arrived at the office at 6 in the morning, as she always did, determined to get a head start on the week. By 8:30, she had reviewed the quarterly projections, approved 3 budget proposals, and fired off a scathing email to the marketing department regarding their underwhelming campaign for the new product line. The executive meeting was scheduled for 9, and as the minutes ticked by, Sloane found herself glancing at the door more often than she would have liked. At 9:15, Damien still hadn't arrived. "He's not answering his phone," Theodore reported, his expression troubled. "I've called his cell and his home line. Nothing." Sloane's fingers tightened around her pen. "That's unacceptable. Does anyone know where he lives?" "I believe he moved about 6 months ago," Theodore said hesitantly. "Somewhere in the northern suburbs, I think. But I don't have the exact address." "Find it," Sloane ordered. "I want someone at his house in the next hour. If he's sick, I need a doctor's note. If he's quit, I need his resignation in writing. And if he's just being irresponsible, I want him fired before lunch." Theodore's face paled. "Sloane, perhaps we should." "Did I stutter?" "No, ma'am. I'll find the address." Theodore scurried away, leaving Sloane alone in the conference room with the rest of the increasingly uncomfortable executive team. She forced herself to focus on the presentation in front of her, going through the motions of the meeting with mechanical efficiency. But her mind was elsewhere, circling back to the image of Damien's tired, haunted eyes. By the time the meeting ended at 11, Theodore still hadn't returned with the address. Sloane's patience had worn thin, and her frustration had curdled into something darker, something that felt uncomfortably like concern. "I'll handle it myself," she announced, grabbing her coat. "Theodore, text me the address as soon as you have it. Everyone else, I expect a full report on the Hawthorne deal by 5 o'clock." She strode out of the conference room, her heels clicking a furious rhythm on the marble floors. Employees scattered before her like startled birds, their eyes averted, their bodies pressing against the walls to make way for her passage. The address Theodore finally texted her was in a quiet residential neighborhood an hour's drive from the city center. Sloane's BMW ate up the miles, her grip tight on the steering wheel, her thoughts a tangled mess of irritation and unease. She found the house easily enough, a small, modest bungalow in a row of similar homes, its white paint slightly peeling, its front yard overgrown with weeds. It looked nothing like the home of a man who made 7 figures a year and lived in the penthouse of a downtown high-rise, at least as far as she had assumed. Sloane parked on the street and approached the front door with a sense of foreboding she couldn't quite explain. She knocked, and when no one answered, she knocked again, harder this time. The door swung open, and Sloane found herself staring at a child. The little girl was perhaps 6 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and eyes that were the exact shade of brown as Damien's. She wore a rumpled pink dress and had a smear of jam on her cheek. Behind her, Sloane could see into the small living room, where toys were scattered across the floor and a half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the coffee table. "Are you from the hospital?" the girl asked, her voice small and hopeful. Sloane blinked, completely disarmed. No. I'm looking for Damien Hart. Is he here?" The girl's face crumpled. "Daddy's sleeping," she said. "He's been sleeping for a long time. I can't wake him up." A chill ran down Sloane's spine. "Sleeping? Sweetheart, can you take me to him?" The girl nodded, turning and padding through the cluttered living room on bare feet. Sloane followed, her heart hammering in her chest, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. The bedroom was small and dark, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. And there, lying motionless on the rumpled bed, was Damien. Sloane rushed to his side, her corporate composure shattering in an instant. "Damien! Damien, wake up!" She grabbed his shoulder, shaking him roughly, and he stirred, a low groan escaping his lips. His face was pale, his brow beaded with sweat, and when he opened his eyes, they were glassy and unfocused. "Sloane?" he murmured, his voice barely audible. "What are you? What time is it?" "It's almost noon," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You missed work again, Damien. I had to track you down like a fugitive. What is going on with you?" He tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him, sagging back against the pillows. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just so tired." "Tired?" Sloane echoed incredulously. "You're the head of acquisitions for a billion-dollar corporation. You can't just sleep through your responsibilities because you're tired." "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, Sloane. I know I know this looks bad. But I don't have anyone else. I don't have anyone to help me. I'm just so tired." She opened her mouth to deliver a blistering retort, but the words died in her throat. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw beyond the exhaustion to something deeper. His face was gaunt, his collarbones visible through his rumpled shirt. His lips were cracked, and there was a tremor in his hands that hadn't been there before. "Damien," she said slowly. "When was the last time you ate?" He blinked, as if the question required genuine thought. I don't remember." "Yesterday? The day before?" Sloane pressed her lips together, a strange ache forming in her chest. "And your daughter? The little girl in the living room, she's yours?" The name seemed to break through his fog. He struggled to sit up again, his eyes widening with sudden alarm. "Isabel? Is she okay? Where is she?" "She's fine," Sloane said, placing a hand on his chest to keep him down. "She's in the living room. She said she couldn't wake you up." The words hit him like a physical blow. His face contorted, and Sloane watched, stunned, as tears began to stream down his cheeks. "I'm failing her," he whispered. "I'm failing everyone. She's been sick, you see. My wife, she died 2 months ago. Cancer. And Isabel, she's been so scared, so confused. She wakes up screaming every night. I can't comfort her. I can't make it better. I've tried, Sloane. I've tried so hard." Sloane felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. She had always seen him as just another ambitious corporate climber, a man who existed to serve her company's bottom line. She had never stopped to consider that he might have a life outside the office. A family. A daughter who needed him. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked, her voice softer than she had intended. "Why didn't you ask for help?" Damien laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "And tell you what? That I'm falling apart? That I can't keep my daughter fed and my job and my life together? You'd have fired me on the spot." "I wouldn't have." "You would have," he interrupted, his gaze finally meeting hers with a flash of something like accusation. "You're Sloane Whitmore. You don't care about people. You care about profit margins and quarterly reports and making sure your empire stays intact. I've seen you destroy men for less than what I've done." The accusation stung, more than Sloane wanted to admit. She opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he wasn't wrong. She had been exactly that person. Cold. Calculating. Merciless. But she wasn't that person now. "I'm going to get you some food," she said abruptly, standing up. "And then we're going to figure this out. Both of you, you and Isabel. We're going to figure it out." Damien stared at her as if she had grown a second head. "Why would you do that? What do you want from me?" Sloane paused at the door. She looked back at him, at the broken man on the bed who had been pushed to his breaking point, and something shifted inside her chest. "I don't want anything," she said quietly. I don't want to be the person I was anymore." That afternoon, Sloane did something she had never done before. She cancelled her meetings. She turned off her phone. And she stayed in Damien's cluttered little house, cooking him a proper meal while Isabel watched from the kitchen doorway, her big brown eyes following Sloane's every move. "You're pretty," Isabel said, her voice soft. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Sloane nearly dropped the pan. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a friend. From work." "Daddy has a lot of friends from work," Isabel said thoughtfully. "But they don't come here. They just call and yell at him." Sloane's heart clenched. "Who yells at him?" "The one with the loud voice," Isabel said. "He tells Daddy he's going to fire him. But Daddy can't get fired, because then we'd be homeless and I'd have to go live with Grandma, and Grandma doesn't like me very much." Sloane set down the pan and knelt in front of the little girl. "No one is going to fire your daddy," she said firmly. "I'm his boss, and I'm telling you, he's not getting fired. He's too important to the company." Isabel's face lit up with a smile that transformed her features. "Really? You won't fire him? Never, Sloane promised. And you know what else? You and your daddy are going to be fine. I'm going to make sure of it. The word surprised her as much as they surprised Isabel. But as she said them, she felt the truth of them settle into her bones. She had spent her entire adult life building walls around her heart, convinced that empathy was weakness and connection was distraction. But looking at this fragile child and her broken father, she understood something profound: the fortress she had built wasn't protecting her. It was imprisoning her. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Sloane had ever experienced. She started visiting Damien's house regularly, bringing groceries and helping with Isabel's bedtime routine. She hired a grief counselor for the little girl, someone who specialized in helping children process the loss of a parent. She rearranged Damien's schedule at work, reducing his hours and delegating his responsibilities to other team members. And somewhere along the way, she stopped being his boss and started being his friend. It wasn't easy. Damien was stubborn and proud, ashamed of his vulnerability and resentful of her help. There were arguments, accusations, and long silences. But slowly, painfully, he began to heal. And Sloane healed too. She started showing up to work earlier and leaving earlier, making time for the life she had always denied herself. She adopted a rescue dog named Jasper, who greeted her at the door with wagging tail and slobbery kisses. She started taking weekends off, exploring the city she had spent years ignoring. She even called her estranged sister, the first conversation they had shared in over a decade. But the most profound transformation happened in the quiet moments she spent with Damien and Isabel. She taught Isabel how to make pancakes, the girl's small hands working the batter with intense concentration. She took her to the park, pushing her on the swings until her laughter echoed through the trees. She read her bedtime stories, her voice soft and patient, and when Isabel fell asleep clutching her hand, Sloane felt something crack open inside her chest. She wanted this. Not just the career, not just the money and power and respect. She wanted the messiness of family, the chaos of love, the undeniable joy of being needed. And she wanted Damien. She fell in love with him slowly, not in a single moment of revelation but in 1,000 small ones. In the way his eyes lit up when Isabel laughed. In the way he sang off-key while cooking dinner. In the way he looked at her sometimes, his expression unreadable but his gaze lingering a moment too long. She was terrified. Loving someone meant vulnerability, and vulnerability had always been her greatest enemy. But for the first time in her life, she was willing to take the risk. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the day she had found him in that dark bedroom. Sloane was in the kitchen, helping Isabel with a school project, a model of the solar system that required more glitter and glue than any reasonable project should. Damien was in the living room, watching a football game on the small television, his laughter occasionally drifting into the kitchen. "Daddy," Isabel called. "You're supposed to be helping us." "I am helping," Damien protested. "I'm moral support." "That's not helping," Isabel said, rolling her eyes with the dramatic flair only a 7-year-old could muster. "Sloane, tell him." Sloane smiled, wiping a smudge of glue from Isabel's cheek. "Your father is hopeless," she said, loud enough for Damien to hear. "But I suppose we love him anyway." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she felt her cheeks flush. She had never said the word love in relation to Damien out loud. She had barely admitted it to herself. The kitchen went silent. Isabel looked up at her, her expression puzzled, and behind her, Sloane heard the sound of the television being muted. "Sloane," Damien said, his voice quiet. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" She nodded, her mouth dry, and followed him into the small backyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I heard what you said," Damien finally murmured. "In the kitchen. Did you mean it?" Sloane wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed. Yes. I mean, I didn't mean to say it like that. It just slipped out. But it's true. I do. I love you, Damien. And I love Isabel. I love her like she was my own. She waited for the rejection, the polite dismissal that would leave her standing alone in this quiet yard, her heart in pieces on the grass. Instead, Damien stepped forward and took her face in his hands. "You have no idea," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "how long I've waited to hear you say that." And then he kissed her. It was soft and gentle, a kiss that tasted of hope and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, Sloane was crying, and she didn't even care. "I love you too," Damien whispered against her forehead. "And Isabel loves you too. She talks about you constantly. She wants you to be her mom." Sloane laughed, a wet, joyous sound. "Her mom? But I'm not. I mean, I can't have. I've never been a mother before. I don't know how." "Neither did I," Damien said, smiling. "We figure it out together. Isn't that what families do?" 2 years later, Sloane stood in the same small yard, now transformed with flowers and a new playset for Isabel. The house had been renovated, its peeling paint replaced with fresh white, its overgrown garden tamed into something beautiful. She had sold her penthouse and moved in with Damien, trading her sterile, modern apartment for a home filled with warmth and laughter. Their wedding had been small and intimate, held in the community garden where they had first taken Isabel for a picnic. Theodore Winthrop had officiated, tears streaming down his face as he pronounced them husband and wife. Sloane's sister had been there too, their reconciliation stronger than ever. And there, standing in the front row with a bouquet of wildflowers clutched in her small hands, was Isabel. She was 8 years old now, and she had grown into a vibrant, curious girl who loved science and hated wearing shoes. She had not stopped calling Sloane Mom since the day of the wedding. Sloane's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a familiar chime from the office. Her assistant was reminding her of the quarterly board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. She smiled, swiping the notification away without reading it. "Mom, come on." Isabel called from the yard. "I found a caterpillar. He's so cute. You have to see him." Sloane walked to the back door, pausing to take in the scene before her. Damien was on his knees beside Isabel, examining the caterpillar with exaggerated fascination. The dog, Jasper, was chasing his tail in circles. The garden was in full bloom, the air thick with the scent of roses and honeysuckle. She had once believed that success meant power, money, and independence. She had built her life around the conviction that she needed no one, that emotion was weakness, and that family was a distraction from greatness. She had been so wrong. "Coming," she called, stepping into the sunlight. "Don't let him crawl away before I get there." Damien looked up at her, his eyes warm with love. "He's not going anywhere," he said. "We're right here. We'll always be right here." And Sloane believed him. She knelt beside her family, her heart full to bursting, and watched the caterpillar inch its way across the grass. She was no longer the ice queen of Whitmore Consolidated. She was Sloane Hart, wife, mother, and the happiest woman in the world. The city of Viridia shimmered in the distance, its towers of glass and steel reaching toward the sky. But Sloane didn't look at it anymore. She had found something far more valuable than any empire. She had found her home.